Welcome into the Jazz Notes podcast. I'm Ben Anderson.
I'm Chandler Holt.
We are recording this on March 3rd, the first podcast of the month. There are 60 games left in the season there are 22 games left in the season for the Utah Jazz. They are 60 games in. Excuse me for that. Chandler, excited to have you back.
Yes, glad to be back as well.
Apologize for last week, apologies for last week. I had the volume turned down so low on the podcast. So if you were listening and you're like, why is this so quiet and the commercials are so loud? That was just 100% my fault. So excited that you're back and able to upload it. So
yes.
Appreciate that, Chandler. All right. Big show as always. Some Jazz news to get to. Because they are 60 games into the season, not 60 games remaining in the season, we will look at the Jazz because they are basically 3/4 of the way through the year. Yep. They are 75% through the season. So we'll just talk about where they are compared to where we thought they would be or should be. And then let's look over the last 22 games and make a prediction on how many wins they get.
Okay.
I think we can do that. And because we did that at the halfway point.
Yes. And
we'll update where we are because the Jazz have picked up a couple of maybe unexpected wins lately. But we will get to your mailbag questions at the end of the show. As always, we'll update you on the standings. Our normal things.
Bunch of questions today.
Yeah, I think we're close to 14 or 15. So
yeah.
one of the longer mailbags we've had.
So really quick, we can start with two just quick one-off pieces of weekly news. Jaden Springer signed, I believe, with the Jazz 2 weeks ago, and then a couple days ago signed a 3-year deal. And then upcoming, we're going to get some NBA Rookie of the Month news, but in the overall Rookie of the Year race, Isaiah Collier is currently 7th on the rookie ladder.
Which, by the way, he's got a real chance to make all-rookie team then.
Yeah.
Maybe all-rookie second team. They only do 10 players. They don't do 3 teams. They do 2 teams. But I think he's got an argument to be an all-rookie second team player as a point guard. But there are some decent guards, but this is just a bad rookie class. It's a really terrible rookie class. So he definitely has a chance to make it, and that would be 3 straight years where the Jazz have had all-rookie players. I wonder if they've ever done that. Maybe in the 80s they did it. John and Carl both certainly were all rookie. Maybe John wasn't even. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look. I'd have to do some research. But yeah, I'd keep an eye on all rookie team, all rookie of the month for February. Yeah, because Isaiah should be in that conversation. I think Steph Castle would probably win in the West, but maybe Isaiah wins.
Yeah.
And credit last week. Jazz Time Jones on Twitter asked, "Does Jaden Springer have a chance to stick? He seems capable." And it was a mailbag question. I said, I think they'll probably keep that 10-day spot open and just kind of rotate players in and out, and they've done that in the past. They didn't. They just signed him to the deal, and the Jazz roster is full. So unless they were to waive somebody else, which I don't expect to happen, the Jazz aren't going to be auditioning anybody else. Now, the truth is they don't need to audition everyone. Everyone's auditioning.
Yeah.
Kanye George is auditioning. Isaiah's auditioning. Kyle Filipowski's auditioning. There is value to signing these guys to these non-guaranteed contracts. I think if you look back at the Mikal Bridges trade, I have to look up who exactly it was, but the Knicks last year signed a guy late in the season, exactly one of these, a 10-day player. They signed him to a 3-year or 2-year non-guaranteed deal. And then if you remember vaguely, there was kind of a weird hang-up where the salaries actually didn't match in the Mikal Bridges trade like they thought. And they were like, oh man, are we going to have to throw in Deuce McBride, a player they actually really liked, to get this deal done? And you were so far down already where the trade had been announced, it would have been hard to back out of it, a la Mark Williams. And then what they ended up doing is I think it was even just Shake Milton or somebody who they had signed to an extra year deal that they just threw in and said that'll be the extra money, and they didn't have to give up somebody they liked. Yeah. So that's the value of why you would sign Jaden Springer. And I talked to him last night. It's on the KSL Sports Instagram. It's on my Twitter. Just how does he feel about getting signed? And even off, once the camera was off, he was so juiced. He was so excited to be signed, and rightfully so. He got a bunch of money, and he's not out of a job tomorrow.
Yes.
And he, worst case scenario, he's on the Jazz summer camp team or summer league team, and then probably in training camp with them. Yep. So he his next 8 months of his life are planned, which he was really happy about, and rightfully so. But that's why the Jazz would sign this deal. It gives you another movable piece that teams are realizing has some value in the offseason.
All right, now let's look back at the last week for the Jazz, a busy 4-game slate. 1-3, started with a 114-112 loss to the Trailblazers, and then a 118-101 biggest loss of the week to the Kings. And then they snuck out a very exciting 1-point win over the Timberwolves, 117-116. And then last night, a loss to the Pelicans, a big loss being at that 128-121.
1-3 probably accurate. Certainly not the one that we thought they would win. I didn't think they'd beat Minnesota, but everybody's hurt, and then Ant got suspended the night before, so that ended up being a winnable game for the Jazz. They lost the game they needed to lose.
Yes.
You had to lose last night. You had to. And I don't really care to get into a moral conversation about tanking or not tanking. The system tells you to do it.
Yep.
The truth is, if you hate the system, fine. The Jazz are playing by the system's rules. So I don't care necessarily that they're doing it. I don't care if anyone does it. The system rewards it.
Yep.
And as long as the system rewards it, you do what the system allows. You find the weaknesses in the fences like the Velociraptors and you break out. Like, that's what you got to do. And this is a weakness in the fence, and the Jazz are attacking it. So they needed to lose to the Pelicans.
Yep.
If they had beat the Pelicans today, they would be a half game ahead of the Pels, having played one fewer game, so they could have made it up. But with 22 games left and the Pelicans having a somewhat significantly easier schedule the rest of the way, you didn't want to be ahead of them.
Yep.
And now, I don't know if the Jazz are going to be able to hold on to it. We'll talk about a little bit more of that in the mailbag. We got a question about it, but you are back essentially 2 games. Yep. Assuming the Jazz lose tonight and catch up to the Pelicans as far as just games played goes, the Jazz are 2 wins behind and 2 losses ahead.
Yep.
And it's exactly where you want to be. You want to be able to control your own destiny. You want to have the 3rd worst record in the NBA. You'd love to have the 1st. I don't think you're going to get there. We'll talk about that in a moment. But you want to have one of the best odds of drafting in the top 4. And by being one of the 3 worst teams, you get that. That's what that top tier looks like. And last night's loss went a very long way to doing it.
I was about to say, this is one of those rare hate the game, not the player kind of situations.
Yeah, exactly right. Even though Will Hardy was mad, Will Hardy was the only person mad about last night's loss.
Yes.
Everybody else that was a loss they needed to have. They were up 6 in the 4th quarter. They had erased an 18-point lead. It felt like everything was trending in their direction. And they made some decisions to make sure that they didn't win that game. And they were the right decisions. I don't care what you say. That was the right decision.
We can go past all of the stats talk from these games, but one thing I do want to point out from last game is Oscar Tshiebwe, double-double, 16 and 13.
Yeah.
Get some, the Jazz had a crazy injury report. I think there was 6, 7 guys out.
7 guys I think were out.
Yeah.
Taylor Hendricks is out for the year, but I think it was the other 6 of the Jazz's 9 best players, 8 best players.
But yeah, Tshiebwe gets very solid amount of court time, and he makes the most of it with a great game.
The Jazz would have won had he closed the game.
Yeah.
They pulled him out of the game and put in Kyle Filipowski, who was a minus 25 on the game because he physically does not have the ability to guard Zion Williamson, and Oscar Tshiebwe does.
Yes.
Oscar Tshiebwe is very strong and a very big person and can stand in front of either Kelly Olynyk or Zion Williamson, and right now Kyle Filipowski cannot. And the Jazz made a business decision to go with the player who could not stay in front of him, and they lost the game as a result. So that was the right move. We saw Brooklyn when they were here in that overtime game. The Jazz beat Brooklyn. Jordi Fernandez pulled Ben Simmons in the middle of the overtime after he hit a shot to give Brooklyn the lead. He made a tanking decision to pull Ben Simmons out of the game. Look, I think the plan was always to get flipped back in the game.
Yeah.
Oscar was not going to play the entire 4th quarter. So in that sense, I don't think that's what Will Hardy did. But if you wanted to win that game, you probably could have ridden Oscar Tshiebwe to the finish and had a better chance.
Yeah.
But so credit Oscar, who's also just honestly the sweetest person on the planet.
Yeah.
He is the best dude. I hope he makes tens of millions of dollars. He would turn it into, millions of wells and homes for people where he's from. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. There would not be better money spent in the NBA than if it all goes to Oscar Tshiebwe. He is an awesome person, and he would go, I'm sure the money would go to helping people.
Yeah.
So rooting for Oscar.
Take a look at the next week for the Jazz. The 9-game homestand ends tonight as the Jazz host the Detroit Pistons, and then they're going to be in Washington against the Wizards, another big bottom of the standings game on Wednesday, in Toronto on Friday, and then in Philadelphia on Sunday.
This is a really big stretch. So last Monday, I wrote after the podcast that this 10-game stretch for the Jazz, which was, coming back from the break, starting that Monday, and then these first 3 games, I think, of this Eastern Conference road trip were the most important of the year. You lost to the Pelicans, which was great. That was a huge loss. And now you look at what the Jazz have coming up. You need to probably lose these games. I think you are going to lose to Detroit. They're one of the hottest teams in the league. But Washington, Toronto, Philly are all winnable games. None of those teams are trying to get to the playoffs. And if you accidentally won all 3 of them, you would pass the Pelicans again, and you might not ever fall back behind them.
Yes.
So this is an interesting stretch of games for the Jazz. These are really crucial.
We will get more into this with the standings talk, but right now Washington is 3.5 games back. I feel like this whole year have been okay, Washington has secured that worst record.
Yeah.
If the Jazz lose that game, they're 2.5 games back. I know there's only 20 games left in the season.
But they play twice.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
But yeah, what do you think for this week? 1-3?
I still think probably 1-3.
1-3.
Yeah, I think they're going to lose to Detroit, and then it's are you going to beat, 2 of these teams on the road? It's certainly possible, But, like, didn't Philly just beat Golden State?
Mm-hmm.
And Washington is rolling out lineups that have Marcus Smart and Chris Middleton in them.
Yeah.
Like, you can lose that game. And Toronto's actually good. You know, Toronto had that really good stretch where they won, and then they have since backed off. But, you know, if the Jazz lose all four, it'd be pretty impressive. But
Yep.
I think they probably win one.
Okay. You want to do standings update, then take a break?
Yeah, let's do it. We can get into our do you want to
Three-quarter.
Do you want to do that after the break?
Sure.
Okay, we'll do that after the break. Quick standings update. Jazz are 15-45, worst record in the Western Conference. Third worst record in the NBA overall. Now a game and a half ahead of New Orleans, which is one of the bigger gaps they've had. It feels like in a while. I'm going to give you a hot take here, and I'm just going to disappoint fans.
Okay.
I think there's two races going on. I think there's a race for 1 and 2, and I think there's a race for 3 and 4.
Okay.
I think the race for 1 and 2, as much as we're talking about, yes, the Jazz play the Wizards twice. Maybe the Wizards do randomly get hot. It's like it's possible.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these new players they bring in gel, and Chris accidentally wins them a game, and Marcus Smart accidentally wins them a game. It's possible. I'm not going to pretend it's not. I don't think you're going to catch Charlotte at all. And if you're not going to catch Charlotte, they're still ahead of Washington.
Yes.
So I think it's the Jazz and the Pelicans for 3 and 4, and I think it's the Wizards and the Hornets for 1 and 2.
Okay.
You just get so far late in the season. It's like 4 games is a lot.
Yeah, it's
like
hard to
I
say.
wouldn't pick a team at the top to be able to make up 4 games or 3 games. Like I don't think if Milwaukee was 3 games back of Boston, I wouldn't be like, yeah, I bet they catch them by the end of the year. The same happens at the bottom.
Yeah.
It's just really hard to make up those types of games, and I don't expect it to happen. I think that's going to burst a lot of people's bubble. Truthfully, I think that should simplify your life. Just look at the Pelicans.
And unfortunate for that 3-4 race, if that's how it ends up playing out, is that New Orleans has the 6th toughest strength of schedule remaining. Jazz are down at 11. And then Washington has the 27th easiest.
Yeah.
And where are the Hornets? Hornets are basically right 13th toughest, right behind the Jazz.
So, yeah, the way you want to look at this is the tougher, the better if you're trying to tank. So New Orleans having the 6th most difficult schedule the rest of the way, their average opponent win percentage is .534, so they're all above 500 teams. The Jazz's is .513.
Yeah.
So the Jazz have the 11th most difficult schedule remaining. Again, you can just look at Tankathon and look at their most difficult games. I actually broke it down last night in my article, my post-game article. If you want to go look it down, I went a little more in depth that way. What I would point to is the Jazz have 10 games at home and 12 games on the road, so that's advantage. They actually have more games on the road than the Pelicans do the rest of the way. So I think that's going to be advantageous for them. However, I do think the value for the Pelicans is that they have fewer games against teams that are competing for anything.
Yeah.
They have, I think, 4 games left against the non-playoff teams or play-in tournament teams, and the Jazz have 5 of those games left.
Yeah.
So the nice thing is you do control your destiny. If you want to lose every game to Washington, you probably can figure it out. If you want to lose to Charlotte, it might be difficult, but you can probably figure it out. Here, I'll quickly read it to you. Just since I've done the work, I might as well tell you what's going to happen. Over the final 21 games of the season, New Orleans has 12 teams inside the top 6 seeds. Those teams are really pushing hard because they're trying to hold on to their top 6 seed. They have 5 games against teams that will be in the play-in tournament, and they have 4 games against teams that are not in playoff seeding at all that are probably tanking.
Mm-hmm.
The Jazz have 11 teams ranked in the top 6 of their conference, 4 against play-in tournament teams, and 7 of the Jazz's last 22 games are against teams not going for the playoffs.
Okay.
So 7's a lot.
Yeah.
You're going to have to find a way to lose those games. It's why these next 3 after Detroit are so critical. Because if you were to lose all 3 of them or go 1 and 2, you've probably survived that, and then there's only 4 left, and you're probably in a pretty good spot.
Yeah.
And you certainly don't want to beat those teams on the road. Like, you're probably going to beat Washington and Salt Lake. You're probably going to beat Toronto and Salt Lake. If you sweep them late in the year, that's going to hurt.
Yes.
So, all right, let's take a break. When we come back, or do we want to look at the other teams coming up? I'm sorry, did we look at what their upcoming schedules were?
Oh, yeah. I can go through those really quick. For the Pelicans, and these are all basically until we come back next week, so until next Monday. The Pelicans are in L.A. against the Lakers. They host the Rockets, and then they're in Houston, and then they host the Memphis Grizzlies.
0-4.
The Hornets host Golden State, host the Timberwolves, host the Cavaliers, and then host the Nets.
0-4.
Yep. Wizards in Miami, host the Jazz in Toronto.
1-2.
Okay.
They'll beat either the Jazz or Toronto.
Okay.
So I think the Wizards will pick up a game.
Yeah.
And if you're a Jazz fan, you hope it's over the Jazz.
And I agree with you that the first 3, Warriors, Timberwolves, Cavs, 4, the Hornets, those should all be pretty considerable losses. Maybe they sneak a win out of the Nets.
I think the Hornets just lost to lost to Washington, though, right?
Yeah,
Like the Hornets are awful.
terrible
and
right
just
now.
had I think the worst 4-game stretch in NBA history. Or 3-game stretch. They lost by 150 points.
Something crazy like that.
Horrible.
Yeah.
So they're horrible. All right. Let's take a break. We'll come back. We'll look at where the Jazz are 3/4 of the way into the season, and we'll get to your mailbag. Stick around. More Jazz Notes coming up next. Welcome back to the Jazz Notes podcast. Ben Anderson, Chandler Holt. All right, the Jazz are 60 games into the season. Let's just take a quick look at where they are in the standings. I know we just mentioned this, but the last 22 games of the season, we'll give our projections on how many they win and what we think that means for the team and where they finish in the year. It's tough.
It is.
So these next 4 games, it's like the last easy games the Jazz have, and they've got a couple at home, but there's no easy stretches. And even then, an East Coast road trip through Washington, Toronto, Philly, when we know not everyone's going to be playing, is not necessarily an easy stretch.
Yeah.
So I think right now, if you had told Jazz fans with 22 games left in the season, you would have the 3rd worst record in the NBA, I think Jazz fans would have taken it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
They've got a game and a half back, and really it's probably 2 games. Now, they could beat Detroit tonight, but if they lose tonight, it's a full 2 games back of New Orleans with the same amount of games played. I think that's a good spot to be in. I think Jazz fans would take that because maybe Jazz fans will roll their eyes at this. This hasn't been that brutal of a season to watch.
It hasn't.
They're in a lot of close games. Last night was a fun game.
Yeah.
They lost. The Stars weren't playing. Jazz were up 6. They made a huge run. They gave up a 15-0 run. They had a chance to get steals late. It's easy to engage with still, even if you know they're not going to the playoffs, and that's a little hopeless. So it's not been that painful, whereas Charlotte that we're talking about right now is just impossibly painful. Washington at least has some draft picks and has some sense of a future, but they tanked last year and got the number 2 overall pick. And Alex Sarr, I think, is going to win Rookie of the Year, but he's not. He's one of the worst Rookie of the Years ever.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean a whole lot there. So I honestly think the Jazz, if I were to give them a grade through the season, be a very solid B. I'm not sure their young player has evolved into a superstar, but you found your starting center of the future in Walker Kessler. You absolutely exceeded draft expectations for Isaiah Collier and Kyle Filipowski. Losing Taylor for the whole year stinks. Cody not showing more, I think, is hard. But you're in a position to get a guy in the draft, and that's what the whole year was about.
So looking at the last stretch of games, how many wins do you think they are? Remember, the Jazz are at 15-45 right now.
I'm counting. We already said they were going to win 1 in the next week.
Yes.
And then it gets pretty sparse, to be honest with you. But they still have home games against Toronto. They have home games against Chicago. By the way, Chicago's trying to make the playoffs. Home games against Washington. A home game against Portland late in the year. Legitimately, I said at the halfway point, I said 19 wins, and I'm sticking with it. I think the Jazz are going to win 4 more games the rest of the year.
Okay, yeah. I was, it's sort of like the thing where you look at the remaining games and you're it's just team versus team. And you're well, the Jazz aren't a better team here, but they're going to win some of these games
you
at the
win
end of
games.
the day. Yeah. And I'm looking specifically at this stretch in the second half of March. There's a 6-game homestand. In that homestand is the Bulls, the Wizards, and then you have Boston and Cavs. Those are blowouts. And then Memphis and Houston.
All losses.
Yeah. But that Chicago-Washington,
they will win one of those games.
It's kind of spooky.
And
exactly.
I would even go bigger. I would go, they get Toronto at home on March 14th.
Yep.
They have a quick one-off at Minnesota. And then they get Chicago and Washington. Pretty safe the Jazz win one of those games.
Yes.
The Jazz will beat one of Toronto, Chicago, or Washington and Utah. And may win 2. But they're going to win one of those games. We already said they would win one of these next 4. Detroit, Washington, Toronto, Philly. So that's 2. And then it's that's it.
Yep.
You're at Charlotte. You probably beat Charlotte on March 31st, but maybe not. Depends on who plays. Maybe you don't, and then maybe you beat Portland April 9th because Portland comes to Salt Lake and nobody plays.
Yeah.
But that's 4 wins. That's honestly what I think. I think I've got the Jazz at 4 wins. That's 19 on the season. I think 19 probably gets you the 3rd worst record in the NBA.
Yes. For me, I think that worst case / best case scenario is 2 more wins.
Yeah.
And it's 2 wins through 20 games
that's really bad.
That's really bad. And
Yeah.
not. I feel like it's as likely the Jazz surpass 20 wins and they get only 2 wins.
Agreed.
But I think they will be somewhere between 18, 19, 20 range.
Because a couple of these guys are going to get shut down for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Soon. There's a chance we don't see Jordan play again. Now, he could play tonight because of this foot thing, but there's at some point Jordan's going to get shut down for the rest of the year. Lowry will probably get shut down for the rest of the year. Walker might get shut down for the rest of the year. John Collins might get shut down for the rest of the year.
I think a surprisingly important game, Monday, March 31st in Charlotte against the Hornets. Like you said, there could be a lot of guys who just are out for the rest of the year by then.
Yep.
So,
and then it's like, do you just rest Keontae and Isaiah?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we're only actually sitting 2 players because half the other guys are gone. And if Colin Sexton wins it for you, fine. If not, you lose that game.
Yep.
So I've got 4 more wins the rest of the year, which puts you on a rate of 1 win and about 5 losses.
Yeah.
Which is, every other week you get a win. And I think that's about where they are. So keep an eye out. Keep an eye on what this looks like. Maybe they get to 20. Yeah. But I really don't think they're a risk to get to 21 or 22. That would be really surprising to me. All right. As always, find me on Twitter at Ben's Hoops. You can find me at Blue Sky at Ben's Hoops as well. It's where you can find Chandler at C. Holt Sports on both platforms as well. Ready to get in the mailbag?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
We can start off with some DM questions from Dan, USU, the Right Blue. In honor of this month's big holiday, what was the luckiest shot in Jazz history?
I think you mean St. Patrick's Day.
Yes.
Honestly, look, there's a lot historically in John Stockton's shot in Houston. If the Jazz win the lottery and get Cooper Flagg this year, the luckiest shot is Grayson Allen falling out of bounds, hitting a 3 with 0.5 of a second left. Actually, he hit 2 threes in the final 2 seconds. Lauri Markkanen hitting a free throw instead of missing the free throw, which would have ended the game for the Jazz. Like, those all could be in the conversation.
Yeah.
Grayson Allen hitting a 3 to send that game to overtime, giving the Jazz the right amount of lottery balls to win the lottery, could be huge.
Yeah.
That's a big shot. So I hate to be facetious, but it might be that.
Yeah.
Whatever the other team did to give the Jazz the best chance to win the lottery and they get their next superstar might be the best trade or the best shot, I should say, that allows them to make these moves.
I'm not the biggest pre-2000s historian, but I will say the first one that comes to mind when I think of a lucky Jazz shot is the Trevor Booker against the Thunder.
Sure. Yeah, the tap over the head.
Yeah.
It's one of the great shots in the NBA.
Yeah.
There's some of the weird ones of guys throwing the ball from over their head out of bounds and it goes in, or a half-court heave. Yeah, Trevor Booker, 0.2 of a second, the tap over the head is off of a bounce pass is very funny. So, that's a great one.
Yeah. All right, next one from Dan. In honor of March Madness, which player's alma mater on the Jazz has the best chance to win it all?
Well, Auburn's the best team, and Walker went to Auburn.
Yeah.
And he knows it. And he lets the rest of the locker room know that Auburn's good. These guys all are checking. They're all into it. Like Lowry's paying attention to what's going on at Arizona. Very regularly, Isaiah's pulling up the USC game late because they play late because they're in LA.
Yeah.
So when the Jazz game ends, he's pulling up those games to see what UCLA is doing in the Big Ten. So it would be those 2 teams. And then I'd also say Alabama's good this year. We've got a good basketball team. They've turned into a very good program. So Colin Sexton has a good team as well.
Yeah, but I think the easy answer here is Walker with Auburn.
And they're probably going to win.
Yeah.
They've got Janai Broom, who's a really good player.
Last one from Dan. Where does the Timberwolves win rank amongst the most exciting Jazz games this season? You only have 15 to choose from, so it should be easy, right?
Let me pull up the wins for the Jazz this year. Most exciting. Again, the Brooklyn game went to overtime. They swept the Nets this year, which is bad.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Golden State was a good win, 131-128 earlier this month. That was a really exciting win. They've had all these games are close because they're not winning games big. You know what I mean? They rarely blow teams out. Yeah, Minnesota was really exciting. All the young players played well. KJ Martin was flying all over the floor, dunking balls and catching alley-oops. So it's up there. It's definitely in the conversation.
I forgot that the Jazz beat the Trailblazers by 42 points.
Yeah, they went up there and absolutely spanked them. Remember, they were up 40 on the Pistons, who we're going to see tonight. I think they were up 40 in the first half of that game, and it just slowly whittled down to 10, but that game was never particularly close. They've had some good wins. And, some of them were fun. Like, the game at Miami was fun because Bryce Sensabaugh just went off, and they weren't expected to win, and they did.
Yeah. Okay, getting over to some extra plies now from Riley O'Brien. He has a scenario for us. Wizards take Cooper Flagg, Hornets up at 2. With them having LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, would they still take Harper or Bailey? Or could...
He goes like VJ?
Yeah. And he said, or possibly one of those two could make it to the Jazz at 3. Well, one of them would.
One of them has to.
Yeah. Exactly. But would both of them be available, I guess, maybe his question?
No, I think there's got to be some real questions about Ball.
Yeah.
And whether he's a guy you're going to win with.
Yes.
Or whether if you get Brandon Miller one year and you get Dylan Harper the next, don't you just trade Lonzo or LaMelo, and try and get whatever fleeting value he has? I think teams are I just think the secret's out. He's just not a winner.
Yeah.
And he's still 6'7", and he's still super gifted, and the right team should trade for him. I actually believe that. The right team should make a trade for him.
Yeah.
But if I got the number 2 overall pick, I would take Dylan Harper and I would try and get whatever value I could for LaMelo and move forward.
I wouldn't be surprised if one of these like all-time quality franchises who are in need of talent take a bet on him. Like the one that's in my head is the Heat culture.
Yeah,
you know
right,
what I mean?
right.
Like someone who sees the talent and believes that they can sort of evolve him into the sort of like system player that they need.
Yeah.
But I do agree with you that like if you have the opportunity at one of these top 3 guys, that LaMelo is expendable and you can get a lot for him.
Yeah,
probably.
right. And maybe like Brooklyn even. Maybe one of these
Yes.
teams is like, well, we don't want to do a long rebuild.
Yeah.
So we'll just trade for him. And you kind of probably get him at a little bit of a discount right now. So, no, I don't think – I'm not saying it's not possible.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's a lot of teams that would pass on either a Dylan Harper or an Ace Bailey.
Yeah.
Now, maybe you pass on Bailey because you don't like something in workouts and you prefer VJ Edgecombe.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think anyone's current roster makeup would cause them to pass on anybody.
Yeah.
Like if there was a center going number 1 this year and the Spurs were to win, they might pass on a center.
Yeah.
Because they have Vic. But yeah, I don't see it otherwise.
Next up, from going to the extra platform this week from Sam, Locke seems to think that the Jazz are going to have a hard time staying with a bottom 3 record with the remaining games. Do you think we end at 3 or 4?
I think we just said 3.
Yes.
Yeah. New Orleans is really bad. New Orleans seems more willing to play their players, even though they're not good even when they have their players on the floor. But, they occasionally, CJ and Zion get hot or Kelly plays well. And maybe they just shut all those guys down too. And their schedule is very difficult. I think the Jazz can fend off 2 games if they have to.
Yeah.
And I think they will do what it takes to do that.
Yeah.
And they should. So I said 4 earlier in the year. I've adjusted to 3. I think if you're top 4, you're ultimately fine, but you might as well be 3 in that sense.
Yes. Next up from Josh Chisholm, Bryce is such a good scorer, but does his defense basically negate that? Can/will he get better on that end?
He can. Will he? I don't know.
Yeah.
He's got to try harder. He's got to play harder. He's got to get in better shape continually, and everyone needs to get in better shape. Like Keontae's got to get a lot stronger.
Yeah.
All these guys have to get in a lot better shape. So, Bryce is hard just because he's at his best like he was last night when he gets a lot of touches, and no team's going to give him 20 touches a night. And when he's playing really well, he's getting 20 touches, at least on the offensive end. He's got to be really good in 10 touches and awesome on the defensive end. That's probably his best pathway to being a long-term NBA player who helps a team win. And teams lose interest in guys who don't help you win, that are just kind of guys out there doing their thing. So rooting for Bryce, obviously. Would love to see that happen, but he's got to figure out how to be really good in 10 touches every defensive possession.
Yes.
And not 20 touches and the defense doesn't matter so much because no one's ever going to give him that.
Yeah.
Same with Keontae. No one's ever going to give you that many touches because, Lonzo Ball is more talented than either of those guys, or LaMelo, excuse me, I keep saying that. LaMelo is more talented than either of those guys and is having the same issue that we're talking about trading him.
Yeah.
It's like, because he doesn't play defense at all. So.
Next up from Jeremy Schaefer. I know we all know the Jazz are tanking. Has a question been asked to a Jazz official to get it on record, or do they just no comment all the time and Walker really needs his rest?
What they say is it's developmental season.
Yeah.
Everything is laced with the developmental season. They're focusing on developing the young players, and some guys have to rest to make sure that the young players get the reps, and there's just no replacement for getting these guys on the floor as much as possible, which is, I think, somewhat true.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that because, A, you're trying to maintain relationships with guys, and B, I don't want to cost them money. Like, I don't ask players about bad officiating.
Yeah.
Because they get fined. And then I ask them a question that got them fined, and they don't want to be heard about that. So if I ask Will Hardy, hey, are you guys tanking tonight? A, he's going to be furious at me, which is not the only reason I wouldn't ask the question. Like, Will's been mad at me before, I'm sure. Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I ask bad questions, so he gets mad at me, I'm sure. I'm sure I've annoyed him. But also, if he comments on it, he gets fined, and the whole team gets fined. And then he looks bad to his employer, which is Ryan Smith, who has to pay the fine.
Yeah.
So he can't answer it. So, am I going to put him in an awkward situation to get him fined because he's like, yeah, we're really glad to lose this game last night? No, you can't do that either. So there's just kind of, I guess, common decency. But, Lowry's been asked about tanking. It's not like it's a secret.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's almost not even addressing. What do I expect them to say?
Elephant in the room.
Yeah, right. We all know. Everyone knows. Everyone knew what happened last night.
Yeah.
So it's just part of it. So no, I guess I haven't directly gone to Danny Ainge and demanded answers for why they're tanking. But truthfully, they are developing young players. Also, the answer is right. Hey, we got to see if Isaiah Collier and Keontae George and Bryce Sensabaugh and Kyle Filipowski are players.
That's the thing. I feel like this is a looking to the future season, but that is true in two senses, in both the lottery odds and also the players on your team currently.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's exactly right.
next question from Jazz Time Jones. My Cody Williams comp I'm seeing is a rookie Marvin Williams.
Okay.
Who's yours?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Marvin's was a really good player. Never became a star. You know, there's guys around like DeAndre Hunter.
Yes.
You know, it's like kind of these big, rangy. You hope Cody's better than both of them. Marvin was both players were better as rookies than Cody is.
Yes.
And were better college players. You know, if I remember correctly, DeAndre Hunter took his team to the national championship game. Am I right on that? He was a really good college player.
Yeah.
And Marvin Williams, like, it's hard for people to probably remember now, like, the narrative around Marvin Williams was crazy.
Mm-hmm.
He was awesome. It was like this big deal. He didn't start for North Carolina because we were still early in the one and done era of college basketball, where Roy Williams was like, yeah, we don't start freshmen. So he went and played at North Carolina and didn't start the entire season, even though he was probably their best player. So that was the conversation. So now Cody's like not as good as either of those players coming out of college. You have the understanding of their career. You hope Cody's better than that. But yeah, Cody's it's hard to get a comp on him. But those are interesting. Big, rangy, good defensive guys who can provide something offensively. DeAndre's not that good of a defensive player.
Yeah.
He's he's big. I think Cody's actually a good defensive player.
Yeah.
He plays with his chest a lot. He's just not very strong. But he can stay in front of guys. When he gets stronger, it's going to be hard to get past him.
Yeah. Next up, Cam Young. Who is making the final decisions to tank, rest seemingly healthy guys? Certain games without shame. Hardy, Zanuck, Ainge, Smith.
All of the above?
Yeah.
Probably not Ryan Smith. But ultimately, if Ryan came down the last week of the season, is like, guys, we're tied with the Pelicans. What are we doing? Everybody sits. They would have to sit everybody.
Yeah.
It is Ryan's team. He owns the team. So he gets to say that. But I'm sure it's everybody. Everybody's involved. It's just being like, okay, what we're doing, Jazz are 3/4 of the way in the season. Where are they? How does it look? What does the rest of the year look like? They're doing the same thing.
Yes.
They are sitting in a room somewhere, circling games, saying like, these are some of the key games. These are opportunities. Here's a win total we're probably comfortable with. What do we think the game plan is to do that? That maximizes the on-court product, the development of the young players, the sanctity of basketball a little bit, though I think you should not worry as much about that for 20 games of a season no one's going to remember in 3 years. But I'm sure some of that stuff comes together. Maybe that's a little over-calculated, but yeah, I think everybody's involved in these conversations.
Yeah, and that's one thing I would say is Will Hardy, a lot of times you see him very frustrated, especially when Jazz are lose a big run, lose because of a big run late in a game. You can see him visibly frustrated. Speaking of the press conference, which we have a question on coming up next. But with that said, I don't think he's frustrated about the lack of players who are available or anything like that. It's just what he's seeing on the floor. Of course, the Jazz could probably have won that game last night if they have half of the people who are sitting.
Yeah, if John Collins or Colin Sexton or Lowry plays, the Jazz probably win that game.
Yeah, exactly. But he's just you have young players and they're going to make small mistakes, and then he's basically telling them that's what needs to get cleaned up going into the future, even though maybe the goal was to lose that game last night. Yeah, that's what it comes down to. Next up, speaking of what I just said, from Collier to Kessler, thoughts on Will Hardy's press conference?
I think he's tasked with a lot.
Yes.
He's carrying a lot of weight right now for a team that is losing games, not necessarily focused. Not their number one priority is not winning games, and still he wants guys to do the right thing. And I think he probably felt last night like he saw the narrative of the team needing to lose games trickle in.
Yeah.
And so the focus wasn't there. So I think Will's probably okay with losing games as long as the team is playing hard, and it seems like he didn't feel like the team was playing that hard.
Yeah.
At moments. Still had a chance to win that game. I was a little surprised he was that frustrated after the game.
Okay.
I thought there were other games I've seen where the Jazz were far worse, and he could have been angry at. I wonder if it was a reaction to, my injury report tweet. I tweet out the injury report every time. Went semi-viral.
Yes.
Now, it got retweeted by Worldwide Wob, who's a big Knicks fan and has 1 million followers. So anytime he retweets something, it's going to get picked up. But there was so many people responding to my stupid tweet of just literally it was the Jazz injury report.
Yeah.
No commentary, hardly at all. I just said this is one of the biggest games of the season for the Jazz. Here's all the players that are sitting. And people were all over it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you recognize when it's a big game and they're a little bit brazen about who all is sitting, it feels like the spotlight's on you. And I wonder if Will's press conference was a little bit of a reaction to like, hey guys, this is not up to me. What I control is who's on the court and how hard they play. So when I feel like the guys who are on the court and play hard are exposing me as doing something wrong, I'm going to let them know it.
Yeah.
And he did. And I think he wants them to continue to play hard over the last 20 games of the season. That's what I think it was.
Last question in the extra prize from Trevor Webb. What other NBA team are the Jazz most emulating in their rebuild process? Do you believe there are many different ways to rebuild a team with today's CBA?
There are a lot of different ways to rebuild a team. You've probably got to do a little bit of what OKC did.
Yep.
You probably got to do a little bit of what Houston did. You probably got to do a little bit of what Detroit has done. And I don't know if any of those teams are any good. I know OKC is good.
Yeah.
I don't know about if Houston's actually good. They had a good first half of the season and have fallen apart since. And Detroit, we'll see how good they are tonight. Again, the Jazz beat them by 30 earlier this year, or we're up 30 in the first half, 40. So, I've been told by people in the know that the Jazz feel like to win a title, they're going to have to kick the door down. I said that last summer. You heard me say it. I'll say it again. And, there's a hypothetical this year. Don't aggregate this. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen. But, like, if the Jazz had a truly perfect summer, it probably looks like you get the number 1 overall pick, you draft Cooper Flagg, he dominates Summer League, Devin Booker asks out. For some reason, the Phoenix Suns say, you know who we really want? It's Kyle Filipowski, Keontae George, Bryce Sensabaugh, and 3 first-round draft picks. And the Jazz are like, hell, we have Keontae George, Kyle Filipowski, Bryce Sensabaugh, and 3 first-round draft picks. Sure. Yeah. We'll throw in X amount salary filler also.
Yeah.
And then your starting lineup next year is Isaiah Collier, Devin Booker, Lauri Markkanen, Taylor Hendricks, or excuse me, Cooper Flagg, and Walker Kessler, and you're in the playoffs next year.
Yeah.
Like, that's the best case scenario, right? And that is another pathway to building.
Yes.
Now, that's some of what Houston did, right? Houston was like, we're awful. We want our guys to have some semblance of a basketball team. Let's go get Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet.
Yep.
And Detroit said, we are so sick of being the laughingstock of the NBA, losing 28 or 29 games in a row. Let's go get Malik Beasley and Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway Jr., and that's going to be like the core that lets Cade be a guy.
Yes.
And it's really worked for Cade. That's where the Jazz could mimic some of those, but you hope it's better than Tobias Harris and Tim Hardaway Jr. or Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks.
I agree with you in the sense that the Jazz haven't directly copied any one of these sort of ideals of how to rebuild, but they've picked and choose from these different spaces. Like, they sort of did what OKC Thunder did with Paul George and with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. And then, if you think about it, I think it was 2020, 2021, OKC put Chris Paul next to Shea.
Yeah.
Having like some good veteran presence around these young guys.
Learn how to win.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that you're right. There's sort of things from here and things from there. And this next draft, I think, could end up being a turning point for the Jazz. Of course, we never know who will become available from other teams in the NBA regarding big game hunting, has gotten thrown around a lot in the last 2 years. But yeah, I think that the Jazz are still in a really good spot.
But the Jazz could go full, I don't want to say full OKC because they don't have Shea. They didn't trade for Shea. But the Jazz could trade Lowry this summer still and really fall backwards again. And even if they get Cooper Flagg, they could say, you know what's going to happen? Cooper Flagg is going to sell season tickets. People are going to want to see Cooper Flagg. Jazz are going to have 8 games on national TV if they get Cooper Flagg next year.
Yeah.
People want to see him. Man, that's a great excuse to start over.
True.
Right? That's a great excuse to say you've got your guy. Go out and win 16 games next year with Cooper Flagg playing 65, 70 games, 30 minutes a night. Let him develop as much as possible, and then add A.J. DeBonsa or Cam Boozer or whoever, Darren Peterson, next year. I think that's his name. Go out and add that guy.
Yeah.
So I think that's still on the table, and that is really OKC, where OKC was right around, like you said, with Chris Paul, 40 wins, and then they said, whoa. Let's get rid of Chris Paul and get Chet Holmgren after that next draft, and they did that, and they got Jalen Williams that same year.
Yes.
So I still think that aspect of it is in the realm of possibilities as well. So, and you know what? I don't think the Jazz are committed to one or the other, and I think that's a smart thing to do. You play the hands that are dealt in front of you. All right, I've got some questions from Blue Sky.
Okay.
Should we hit those really quick?
Yeah,
I know
let's do
it's
it.
got a long mailbag. We appreciate everyone sticking around. Sammy Paradise, do you think the Jazz would draft Yegor Demin with their second pick? He's projected somewhere near the second pick. I don't know what he projects at as an NBA player. He had a really good start to the year. He had a really bad middle section. He's been much better in the third. I'm curious to see how he looks in the Big 12 tournament. He's BYU's point guard, by the way, if people don't know. So the Jazz will know him better than anybody in the NBA because Danny's very well involved with what is going down at BYU. At least he's around it a lot, I should say. So I'm sure he's asked, like, hey, how was he as a player? How was he as a guy? You know, Kevin Young can give him all the, this is what he can do, this is what he can't do, this is what he could turn into, this is who he reminds me of, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the question will be if he's actually on the board at like 17 or 18.
Yeah.
This is not a very good draft for depth.
Sure.
It's pretty good in the top 4, maybe top 5. I don't think it's a great draft like 6 to 25.
Yeah.
I think it gets pretty weak, actually. So Yegor could be 8, honestly, because he's got really good NBA size, and if he has a good draft, or a good tournament run, he could put himself back in that conversation. If he doesn't, maybe he falls to 15 and 16, and then, I think the Jazz would probably take a look. But, again, they may just not want another 20-year-old, and I don't blame them for that. Like, trade it or go get Jedi Broom, who's 23 and is the best college player right now, and just say, like, he could help. Like, he can step on the floor and play, and there's some value to just having some guys who you're not swinging for the fences on, but you want NBA players, and he can do it.
Yeah.
Jake the Lynx. With the Jazz intentionally trying to lose so much, it's hard to get a real sense of where the team actually is. I don't think they're championship contenders. They're not, because if they were, they would be competing for a championship. But also are not as bad as their record. What's the best case scenario of record this season if they were trying their hardest to win each game?
I would say in like the 35 to maybe 41 and 41 range.
Here's the hard part you have to realize, and I don't mean you, I mean people in general. When you try every night, teams try against you.
Yeah.
Teams are not trying against the Jazz. The Jazz are beating teams because teams come in, think like, oh, finally, off night. We've played 3 playoff teams in a row. Jazz are going to lay down, and then they're like, Colin Sexton is going 100 miles an hour. What's going on? And they lose.
Yeah.
So if you were a team that teams marked and prepped for and read the scouting report on, that probably subtracts 6 or 7 wins off your like highest end outcome.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. Like, honestly, raw talent, 500 ball club.
Yeah.
As far as guys who've actually ever won anything before and what they're capable of doing, you're probably around 32, 33, 34, right in that range.
And I think this is tied into a previous question that we asked. I can't remember which one, but if the Jazz were playing all of their veterans, right, like 30 to 35 minutes a game, and then they were like, whatever young guys prove themselves can come up, I doubt Isaiah Collier is anything that he is today.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
you've not seen him play.
Yeah.
He's barely played at all because all the minutes have gone to Colin and Jordan Clarkson and, if they wanted to bring in a veteran point guard. But and you would have hardly seen Isaiah at all.
Exactly. And that's the thing is, like, Isaiah could very well be a point guard of the future for the Jazz. Like, maybe it just ends up being a backup if you get one of these guys in the draft or different things shake up different ways. But, like, that's one of the benefits that comes from what the Jazz are doing this season.
Yeah, you just don't know. You don't know what those guys are unless they get to play. As much as you can put them in the G League and hope they do well. Like, we talked about Jalen Hood-Schifino, who dominated G League. By the way, shout out Jalen. He got signed by the Philadelphia 76ers. We also got a question about that last week. He did just sign yesterday on a 2-way deal, so hopefully he's closer to being healthy.
Yeah.
But, like, look at his G League stats. He's Wilt Chamberlain, and he gets on the floor in the NBA and he can't play.
Yeah.
So there is a difference between those two things. You've got to figure out, like, is he a G League monster and can't play at all in the NBA, or can he actually play? And you got to get these guys minutes. So that's what I'd say. Or low 30s, which is what the Jazz did last year and the year before that. I think they were 34 and then 31, and now they're going to be at 19. Finally, I think this is the last question. Holidays. No, I got 2 more. Sorry.
Okay.
Holidays. What's the confidence level of those in the organization that Cody can turn things around after a mostly down rookie campaign? Seems like he knows where to be and understands the game, but lacks confidence and size to make a true impact. Height-wise, he has it. Physicality-wise, he does not. It might not be next year. It might be 2 years. But guys get a lot bigger as they grow, and Cody will as well. He will fill out and have a much better NBA body. He is in the right place a lot. You wish his shot went in a little bit more consistently. It's getting better. I love that he's trusting his ability to drive to the basket more and understands like what he can and can't do. He's not like an elite athlete.
Yeah.
He's not super quick. He's not super springy. He's pretty slithery, and that might limit his overall upside. But so Holly, looking at the Jazz, I think they're still certainly very confident in him. They are not, I think, judging a whole lot on this year, other than like if he had broken out and looked like Cooper Flagg, like maybe okay they would judge him differently.
Yeah.
I don't think he's turned in a rookie year that has like surprised the Jazz necessarily.
Here's my question for Jazz fans: would you rather a rookie that has confidence and strength but no skill or IQ, or a rookie who has skill and IQ and lacks confidence and strength?
And I always try and say this: like, doesn't matter if you have the best rookie, have the best sophomore, have the best junior, and have the best fourth year player in the NBA.
Yes.
Doesn't matter if you have the best rookie. Tariq Evans was not a better player than James Harden, but was a much better rookie.
Yeah.
And then so along those lines, like he will get bigger. And like I thought one of the notes that I haven't seen a story come out on, and I didn't want to steal somebody else's story, and they asked about it, so I just didn't write it. But it's worth talking about. Is that Will Hardy was asked about how Taylor looks, and he's like, Taylor is a monster right now. Like apparently Taylor's gotten huge. He's like really beefed up.
Yeah.
He's like a super strong. Will was like, it's crazy. He's gotten so strong in the weight room with this broken leg. So he just looks like a different person.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what happens. You get a ton of nutrition. You turn into a man. Your body is ready to put on a bunch of weight and fill out. And then you have the best training staffs in the world that feed you and make you work out so you get enormous. So like Taylor was pretty thin when he came in. He had a better body than Cody did. Taylor's got a spectacular body, but got even better. I think Cody's going to get a lot bigger.
Yeah.
And it just might take a year or two, but like guys get a lot bigger in the NBA. That is what happens. So I have no doubt that Cody will do that as well. Finally, Alex on Blue Sky. Do any of the players have nicknames for each other? And do you know who hangs out with whom in their off hours or at like away meals, that kind of thing? Everyone kind of has a nickname. But it's like key.
Yeah.
Yesterday, John Collins, or it was 2 days ago. He was after the Minnesota win. He was making fun of Cody Williams. He just kept calling him Williams, which was very funny. It was just like Williams this and Williams that. And they were just being very funny. Taylor Hendricks is T. Henny,
Okay.
like. So I don't know if there's like, Zay. It's just pretty much shorthand for guys' names. It's not the most creative things. At least it's certainly not what they're sharing in front of us.
Yes.
You know what I mean? As far as who hangs out with each other, this has been kind of interesting. KJ Martin has been like a real bonder. He's been like a real glue piece for, seems like the young players and the old players. He fits really well in between because he's 24.
Yeah.
And he's been in the league for 5 years. So like Lowry and John Collins and Jordan Clarkson and Colin Sexton have seen him a bunch of times. So they're like familiar with him, but he's also only 24. He's like a young dude. So he like totally identifies with, I think, Keontae and Isaiah and Walker and some of these young guys. So he really kind of holds court in the locker room. It's pretty interesting to see. It's noticeable how vocal he is. So I think that's a good aspect of it. The young guys hang out because they were in the same drafts and went through workouts together. And the old guys have kids. Lowry has a kid or 2 kids, maybe 3 now. I think he just had a third. So like these guys kind of have these different lives. And I think they're all friendly. I think everyone's close. Walker or Lowry was close to Simone Fontecchio. Mm-hmm. So that trade was probably hard on him.
Yeah.
And I don't know who like he's since reacquainted with. Walker's a quiet dude. Walker's just like a quiet person. But I think they do get along as a team. But I'm not sure who like on the road is best friends.
Yeah.
When it was the old Jazz team, it was pretty obvious. Like Donovan and Royce were close, and everyone played video games together. And like notoriously, Gordon Hayward and Jeremy Evans were really good friends. I don't know if there's like that relationship right now in this locker room where it's like, oh, those guys are clearly the best friends.
Yeah.
But like, you know what? Keontae was talking the other day about he was worried they went on a road trip and he didn't fully charge. He drives an electric car. He was worried he didn't fully charge his electric car before they drove to the airport to leave it. Mm-hmm. And they were trying to all do the math of calculating like, well, you lose X percent every day you don't drive it.
Yeah.
It was at X percent when you dropped it off. Will you have a charged car when you get back? And like Lowry was like, Keontae, I'll pick you up or I'll drive you. Like, I'm happy to drive you. It's not like Karl Malone ignoring a rookie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that exists necessarily. So they've all got different lives. And like, Colin's on a different wavelength than everyone. Jordan is like making appearances at the U.S. Open for a tequila company. Like, they do have different things and girlfriends and kids. And so, I don't know. Probably didn't answer your question at all. But so no, everyone's fine. Yes, JC is Jordan Clarkson.
Yeah.
T. Henny is Taylor Hendricks. It's not that creative. So anyways, JC is John Collins also.
They call him Walk?
Walk. Yeah, right. It's just like, it's what you would expect.
Yeah.
So, all right. I think that's it. How long do we go?
50 minutes.
Oof. Sorry, everybody. Appreciate everyone tuning in. I know I didn't have my fastball today. We'll be back with you again next week. Find us on Twitter at Ben's Hoops and Blue Sky at C Holt Sports on both Twitter and Blue Sky. And as always, read us at KSLSports.com.